This screencast is to support this lesson on the topic of unusual homes, and the target language is make, let and allow. So we start off with some vocabulary, then there's a listening and the grammar focus with some practice. It's from Stfwd Intermediate by P. Kerr, K-E-R-R, and C. Jones. So the lead-in in the book asks the students to look at two photos and to say which countries they think they are and why. And then it says, what does your town look like from the air? Yeah, bit of a strange question, I feel, but you could ask them some other questions about their town or the type of home they live in their own country compared to the type of home they live in here. The idea really is to get them thinking about different types of home. Do have a focus somehow on homes in Britain though, because this will be useful for them in the next exercise to be thinking about different types of buildings and homes in Britain. So now they're going to look at some new vocabulary and they need to do exercise 2, complete the sentences in column A with a phrase from column B. So they match the two halves together to make complete sentences. So for example, most people in Britain own their homes, but about 30% live in rented accommodation. Okay, so they match those up. Peer check, get some feedback. Once you're happy they've got all the right answers and they can see the right answers matching the number with the letter, they can move on to exercise 3, where they now match the 7 definitions to the words in bold. Okay, so two houses joined together. Which one would that match with from the previous exercise? That would be semi-detached houses. So they work on their own and match each sentence 1 to 7 with each phrase or word from the previous exercise. Peer check, get some feedback. And while they've been peer checking, you can listen to see if there are any that anyone has struggled with, and use some concept checking questions to be really clear on the meaning. Then you can do some drilling. You don't have to drill all of them. For example, flat is quite an easy word to say, but you might want to drill suburbs or terraced houses. Okay. Focusing on any weak sounds, any stress, any tricky sounds in any of those words you think are worth drilling. Then they can do exercise 4, change the sentences in exercise 2 so that they are true for your country. So most people in Spain own their homes, but perhaps they'll change this one, the percentage live in rented accommodation. Okay, so they can change these for themselves. You might want to give them some prep time just to make some quick notes before they have a group discussion and compare their ideas. Next, we're going to set up the listening. So exercise 1 says work in pairs, match the words in the box to the photos A to F. So I would suggest not giving them the words in the box to start off with, but just giving them the pictures, A to F, and getting them to talk together and see if they know the names of these different types of accommodation without giving them anything. And when they've done as much as they can, I would give them the words in the box to complete the exercise. Okay, so yeah, just concept check any of those that you feel need clarifying in terms of meaning, and drill any of the words that you feel they would need to focus on in terms of pronunciation. And then you can ask the second question, would you like to live in any of them? Why or why not? And they can have a discussion about them. You might get them to put them in order of preference, or to choose one they would really like to live in and one they absolutely wouldn't like to live in, and justify with reasons why and why not. So now they're going to listen to an audio And before they listen, you need to set up the task. So exercise 2, listen to 3 people talking about their unusual homes. Where do they live? And they need to choose their answers from the box in exercise 1, so the cave, the houseboat, the light boat, etc. Play the audio all the way through, allow them to peer check, monitor this to see how they've got on and decide whether they need to listen again, and then get some answers, making sure that they're clearly visible to the students. Then they can move on to the second listening task, where they listen again to the same audio and do exercise 3. They make a note of the best and the worst things about where they live. So they're listening to the same people and this time noting down these 2 things about each one. As an example, you can play the audio up to where the answer is for the first person, and they can do a quick peer check before feeding back, and then they can listen to the rest. Now they've got a decent understanding of what's been going on in the audio, they can do exercise 4. They look at the 8 sentences here and they match them to the 3 unusual homes that they'd noted down for exercise 2. In the book, it says to check your answer in the audio script, but I would play the audio again so they can listen and check their answers. Okay. Once they've listened, they can just quickly check together and make sure that they've got the right answers, and then you can just show them the answers and check any that they weren't sure about while you were monitoring. So you see that these sentences all contain the target language of the lesson: make, let, and allow. Okay. Now, as usual, this course book presents the grammar in a box. So we need to kind of bring this off the page and give the students a task to do to work out the meaning and the form. So instead of giving them this sentence in terms of the meaning, I would give them the sentence and leave 2 gaps where it says obligation and permission, and give them a few choices. So I might have obligation, permission, ability, or you could divide them up. So the verb make we use for gap, and let and allow we use for gap, because they're different, aren't they? So make is for obligation, let and allow are for permission. Now, of course, in order to be able to answer this question, they need to be able to see the example sentences from the previous exercise. We don't allow smoking, etc. We make dog owners leave their pets in the garden. Okay, so you need to have an example sentence from the previous exercise, one with make, one with let, one with allow, and then they can fill in the gap. They can work out whether it's obligation or permission. Okay, but give them a task to do that they can discuss together rather than just giving them the answers. Support this with some concept checking questions to make sure they've really understood the difference. So we might want to check the difference between let and allow. So in terms of appropriacy, allow is more formal, isn't it? Let is much more commonly used. And we make dog owners leave their pets in the garden. Is it an order? Yes. Do they have a choice? No. It's our rule. Okay, so it's stronger, isn't it? So when you're happy they've really grasped the meaning, you can focus on form. So here we've got some example sentences from the audio. Okay, and again, they give the form. I would put make plus gap, let plus gap, allow plus gap, plus gap. Okay, and allow plus gap / gap plus gap. Okay, giving them the example sentences to look at, they can work out what comes after the subject in each sentence. Get them to do it together. It's a collaborative, a guided discovery task for them to work out the rules of form. Then you can work on pronunciation by hiding the sentences and drilling the full sentences, paying attention to any sentence stress, linking, any weak sounds, etc. Now it's time for some controlled practice. So we've got 5 sentences and they just need to choose the correct alternative. They let or allow us to put up our tent wherever we want. Let them do it on their own and then peer check. Yeah, they just need to make sure, here the meaning is the same, but of course the form is tricky, isn't it? Because it's different. So they let us put up. So it can't be let because we've got a 2 here, so it's got to be allow. They allow us to put up our tent. So you can refer them back to form to remind them that with allow, we need 2. With let, there's no 2. Okay, so they can do that one as an example and then do the rest alone, peer check, get some feedback. Checking anything that they're still uncertain about in feedback and making sure that they can see the correct answers. Once they've done that, they can answer question 2. What's being described? Was it a hotel, a campsite, or a holiday flat? It was a campsite because they talked about tents. And then they can go on to some further control practice using this substitution table. So exercise 3, use the prompts to make sentences which are true for you. So for example, my boss doesn't let me wear jeans at work. Okay, so there are some examples here at the bottom, and you can elicit 1 or 2 from the students to get them started. You can add in some other people here if you want to make it more relevant to your students, and just get them speaking together. This could be a speaking control practice task where they're making sentences. Now on to some freer speaking. This needs to be quite heavily adapted, I feel, because you know, holiday homes is just not very relevant to our students. But my thoughts are, miss out number 1 completely, but looking at number 2 could be a fun thing to get them to design a holiday home together, thinking about the types of home they talked about earlier. So that brings in some of that vocabulary, answering these questions so they can talk together, come up with some ideas, or you could give them some preparation time to just make some notes and then talk together. And then the second part of that activity could be, what rules would you have if you were renting your holiday home out to some people? So, you know, they could use make, let and allow to talk about that, couldn't they? So, for example, I wouldn't let people smoke inside. Okay, so because it's an imaginary situation, they need to use would or wouldn't. Okay, so set that up, make it nice and visual, elicit a few examples because they're imagining a situation. So in my holiday home, I would make people take their shoes off before they came inside, for example. Okay, so elicit some examples, maybe put some images on the slide to give them some ideas of the types of thing they could think about. And they could talk together and make some sentences about the rules for their holiday home. So the key things in setting this up are the staging. So get them to do exercise 2 first, have a discussion about that, and then come up with some rules. Make sure you do a clear demonstration, elicit lots of ideas, provide lots of scaffolding in terms of visuals and the language you want them to use. So you might have I would / wouldn't, make, let, allow, you know, so ... So you're giving them the structure you'd like them to use as well. Get some feedback on ideas at the end and to make sure that they all agree on the rules, and then do some post-fluency error correction, focusing on the target language.